Welcome to GovCast, connecting with federal IT's top decision makers. I'm Alexander Bolova, production lead at GovCIO Media and Research. With me today is Editor-in-Chief Amy Kluber. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Alex.
You had the opportunity to chat with Wayne Jacobs, Special Agent in charge of the Criminal and Cyber Division of the FBI's DC Field Office. How'd it go?
It was awesome. Wayne is so interesting. So I actually heard him speak at an event a couple months ago at this point, and he was talking about kind of the 5G challenges, how the Bureau is thinking about 5G, but, you know, him being in charge of the Criminal and Cyber Division, I was really interested in digging more into how he's seeing technology really impact that space. So I brought him onto the show.
Yeah, that's such an interesting connection, the FBI and 5G. It's not something I would immediately think that they were paying particular attention to.
It's very critical when you're thinking about how many partnerships they have in the entire law enforcement realm. So the number of different touch points they have with other agencies and then other coordinating bodies like local law enforcement, their field agents need to be plugged in all the time, and they need that data quickly. They need to be able to share it. They need to be able to be in touch with everybody. So that's kind of like what I was interested in, was how is he seeing the importance of, you know, data sharing and modern technology in his operations, but also how is that impacting the cybersecurity conversation?
Right. That really reminds me of all of the coverage we've had recently regarding similar efforts in the Air Force and other branches of the military of just keeping that connection. It's almost like 5G is an issue that touches every agency.
Oh, definitely. For sure. And FBI, they're going through some modernization right now. They're trying to implement their own cyber group internally, and they're really going to be coming out with a lot more opportunities for industry to get involved. So they're looking at things like broad agency announcements and other things for not just 5G, but other modern technologies coming down the pipeline. So he touched on that a little bit. And, you know, me being a legal buff myself, I kind of got to dig into that a little bit as far as how he views the criminal side of cybersecurity.
You've been on quite a run of, I guess, legal buff interviews. I'm thinking about
There's a trend.
The chat you had with Keith Sonderling from the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It's just so funny to connect all of these topics and speakers that we have. It can seem a little disparate at times, but ultimately it really seems like we're revisiting a lot of the same topics and concerns across all of government.
For sure. And if we wanted to spin off a new show, Legal Cast or something, I'm all for it. Let's do it.
This is where I add in like the Law and Order, like dun dun.
Dun dun.
After you say that. Well, with all of that in mind, let's take a listen to your interview.
Welcome to GovCast. I'm Amy Kluber, and I'm here with Wayne Jacobs. He's Special Agent in charge of FBI's Criminal and Cyber Division. So great to have you, Wayne.
Thank you, Amy, for having me. Appreciate it.
So I understand you're rather new in your current role, but not necessarily to the Bureau. So what brought you to the agency to begin with and its mission?
Yeah, so this is the start of year 20 for me in the organization. I would say that what initially drew me to the FBI was its violent crime mission. Had real passion, still do for that work. But ultimately, as I got exposed to more of the Bureau and its work, I really developed a keen interest in our national security mission. I talk about my time in my job previous to this one at FBI headquarters, where I was in the counterintelligence division, helping stand up our National Counterintelligence Task Force, but then ultimately landing in this job approximately 18, 19 months ago, and then also having cyber be part of my portfolio here. I look at cyber as having two components to it, certainly a criminal aspect, but what is really sort of fascinating and interested me is the national security component to our cyber work here at the Washington field office.
Fantastic. Especially in this day and age, cyber has such a huge impact, or I guess evolution that we're tracking. So it's an incredibly important mission there as well. So can you talk through what some of your, I guess, priorities are for this year for the criminal and cyber division and what that is looking like?
Yeah, so certainly two buckets for us, right? On the criminal side, and then on the cyber being two distinct responsibilities. First, on the criminal side, we're focused on, I'd say, three things. One, we've seen an explosion of folks who've abused the Paycheck Protection Program, so the PPP loans. So the fraud that sort of stemmed from the distribution of those loans is certainly an area of focus for us. Second area would be back in 2001, the Department of Justice launched a hate crimes initiative. And that was really just in the wake of increase in hate crimes being reported. And so we wanted to reaffirm our commitment to aggressively pursuing these matters. So that continues to be a focus area for us here at the Washington field office, but across the Bureau, as unfortunately hate crimes have continued to increase. And then certainly violent crime, right? It doesn't take much for folks to sort of be exposed to news reporting about violent crime rising across major metropolitan cities. That continues to be an area of focus for us as well, and supporting and supplementing our state and local partners as they're focused on that activity. And then on the cyber side of things, I would say two buckets there as well. One is your sophisticated crime, cyber criminal actors who are launching disruptive attacks or also launching financially motivated attacks as well. And then nation state actors, right, who are pursuing the economic and national security interests of their respective governments.
Fantastic. I know you mentioned cyber attacks and cyber overall as one of your priorities. And you've mentioned in the past that law enforcement struggles to find the right targets to pursue oftentimes. How do you see overcoming this challenge, especially in today's tech environment?
Yeah, I think one of the keys there, and you'll probably hear me talk about it throughout this discussion, is partnership, right? Partnership certainly sits at the foundation of law enforcement's work and obviously the Bureau's work by extension. And so I would look at that in, again, a few different components. One is sort of our logical partners in the space. Think about Department of Homeland Security, CISA, Department of Defense. But then perhaps most importantly is our partnership with the private sector. So every FBI field office has a cyber task force whose charge and mission is to go out and develop relationships with systemically important companies, those companies that are either directly or indirectly supporting critical infrastructure, developing relationships with them such that we're sharing intelligence, but also to giving those companies an understanding of what our capabilities are by way of threat hunting and ultimately incident response. And then I think beyond that, you think about the entities that are engaged in intelligence collection and dissemination. Right? You think about the Microsoft Mystics of the world, the incident response firms, Mandy and CrowdStrike, what have you, and our relationships with them, understanding the trends, by way of the most recent tactics and protocols that sophisticated actors are leveraging against private sector companies. And then the last piece there, I would say, and this is becoming an increasing phenomenon, is our international partners, right? Certainly think about cyber as a global phenomenon. And so our ability to connect with international partners, take advantage of folks who are leveraging foreign infrastructure to facilitate their attacks, again, sharing intelligence, holding folks accountable even when they don't sit within our shores, certainly critically important to the Bureau's work in the cyber landscape.
Definitely, especially when you're considering such a global phenomenon, as you called it. Those partnerships really do matter, and then how you enable or make those partnerships feasible is critical. So during your time over your career, kind of talk through how you've seen technology evolve pursuant to the mission, and from your perspective, around fraud and violent crime and now cyber, how has that
Yeah.
looked like over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty simply, when I started 20 years ago, much of our lives were not being lived or enjoyed in the cyberspace, right, on the internet. And so, as society moved increasing portions of their lives, to the cyber domain, and now you think about just about every aspect of your life is in some way online. We've seen criminal actors obviously follow, right? And so once you saw sort of the commodification of data become a thing, that's certainly where criminal actors started to focus their attention, right? And so it was incumbent upon us to recognize that and to go where those actors were, and then begin to leverage the tools that we have to ultimately hold them accountable. Looking at it from the fraud aspect of things, I think we've seen increasing sophistication of fraud actors, again, leveraging technology to give themselves more bona fides, credibility as they're leveraging their fraud schemes. In the violent crime arena, I think there's just been an amplification of disputes. Years ago, disputes that were percolating in public were resolved simply by people either walking away or being difficult to find. Now, with social media being a constant thing, those disputes just not sort of resolving themselves in a logical manner. And then, looking at cybercrime, I think what you've seen is a couple of things. One is, a broadening of the attack surface, right? So, as I mentioned, a lot of people's lives are now existing on the internet. As you think about other devices now, wearables, Internet of Things that are also now connecting, these are now opportunities for cyber actors to exploit those vulnerabilities associated with those devices. And then I think the proliferation of actors in the cyber ecosystem, criminal actors in the cyber ecosystem. We've certainly seen a democratization of actors leveraging tools and platforms and services to take advantage of what we call criminal services, cyber criminal services, to facilitate malicious cyber activity.
Right. That's really interesting because, you mentioned the amplification, I think is how you worded it, of certain activities with social media, living on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. You would think, I guess, fighting this crime could be easier, if you will, because there's
Sure.
more evidence, if that's the way to put it, out there. On the other hand, there's more touch points that you have to keep track of. And it's almost like the internet digital doesn't really exist. You don't see it, but it's there and it's like hiding almost. So it's kind of interesting to think about. It's actually not easier, it's harder.
Yeah, I think in some ways it certainly is more difficult to keep track of all of it. It certainly forces us to make sure that we're focused on the most significant and prolific actors in the space. And so, we have to think about what our priorities are, and again, focusing on those most sophisticated and prolific actors in the space. And we certainly do have resources, as I mentioned, the partnerships that we enjoy with the private sector. We're seeing, the activities that are being leveraged. And then we also have, our own sort of human sources, right, who are reporting on things that they're seeing in the platforms and spaces that they're either, working in or just, out, enjoying, their lives in the digital landscape, and reporting back to us on things that they're seeing that may be an indication of criminal activity.
Right. Really interesting. So along that thread, with technology constantly evolving, cyber also evolves. This, you mentioned, the cyber landscape grows and expands. So how do you consider adversaries kind of taking advantage of this to their benefit? And how do you ensure agents are keeping up with that fast pace of change?
Yeah, again, I think, as I mentioned, one adversary is taking advantage of an increasing, landscape for them to leverage criminal activity. And that's through the Internet of Things, but then also to their ability to leverage their attacks, right? So I mentioned this whole idea of cybercrime as a service, right? So folks who don't even have a tremendous amount of technical expertise can go out into platforms and secure all the tools necessary to leverage a cyber attack, whether that's, again, for disruptive purposes or for financially motivated gain. For us, it means that we have to adapt and evolve, right? And so I think about a couple efforts there. One is, again, leveraging the partnerships that are sharing intelligence with us. Second is training. We've invested significantly in the FBI's Innovation Center, which is down in Huntsville, Alabama. And this is a facility that has a cyberkinetic range where we're able to better understand the threats that we're facing, work through what our responses would look like, and just really, put people in environments where, again, they can increase their readiness as they think about what cybersecurity looks like. And then I think the final piece there is, the FBI is fortunate to hire some wonderfully talented people from disciplines that have a sort of a more recent and nuanced understanding of what's happening in the cyber landscape. And so integrating those folks into our workforce certainly helps us stay on top of and ultimately, I think, ahead of the threat. And I would certainly be remiss if I didn't mention specifically not just the agents in the organization, but I think more importantly these days, those folks who are computer scientists, data analysts, people who are helping us make sense of the large data sets out there and all the information that's coming to us from different sources, helping us triage and prioritize where our efforts should be.
Fantastic. So kind of looking ahead and more about, how those partnerships play out with, Justice Department or law enforcement branches. How are you seeing like emerging technologies? What about them excite you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of tools out there. Certainly talk about AI and the promise and perhaps a bit of the peril that AI will ultimately present. But I look at the tools that the private sector is currently developing and our ability to hopefully ingest some of those tools. Obviously there are certain sensitivities about the federal government ingesting tools that are not respectful of people's civil liberties. But there certainly are tools out there that help us get smarter and more efficient with us making decisions about where we're deploying our resources to, again, stay ahead of the threat. I think we certainly believe that everyone has a piece of information or technology out there that helps us as the federal government get better at what we do. And, it is the layering of those tools, the exploitation of that data that, again, helps us stay ahead of the emerging trends and threats within the cyber landscape.
Fantastic. Well, Wayne, this was kind of a great look into some of the things going on in the criminal cyber division at FBI, and really exciting to hear about, I guess, technology's place in some of all these fascinating missions. So this has been a great conversation and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy. That was a great interview. Before we let our listeners go, are there any last thoughts or takeaways that you want to leave our audience with?
So something he did say in the interview, which I do want to call attention to again, is just reminding everyone how difficult it is for law enforcement to sometimes find the right targets to pursue, and then how they're thinking about technology in order to help them with that. So I feel like that's kind of like an underlying theme for the Bureau and for the tech opportunities that are out there and coming down the pipeline.
Thank you, Amy. Listeners can tune in next week for a brand new GovCast. But until then, if you like what you heard, please leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice and a 5-star rating as well. I'm Alexander Bolova.
I'm Amy Kluber.
Thank you for listening. GovCast, along with HealthCast and Cybercast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. For more podcasts and to check out the other shows, head to govciomedia.com. Watch out for new episodes released every Tuesday and Wednesday across our shows. You can follow all of them on your favorite podcast platform. And if you like what you heard, make sure to let us know by leaving a review. And if you have any topics you think we should look into, contact us at newsletter@govcio.com.